This was one of the most popular spots for senior motor industry executives last year. As the sales figures rolled in, they'd come down and practice their swallow diving, usually when the tide was out. Everybody knows the car market was down 21%, but some manufacturers did even worse than that. Porsche were down 40%, Jaguar sales were nearly halved. And the problem for these motoring minnows is they can't afford to invest their way out of trouble. They can't afford the $1 billion or so that it takes these days to design and develop an all-new car. So what they have to do instead is practice the art of evolution, evolving existing models rather than revolution, starting again with a clean piece of paper. Every decade has its fashion accessories, and with the passing of the 80s, we can wave goodbye to all sorts of things. We can wave goodbye, for instance, to Ray-Ban sunglasses, to filofaxes, to electronic personal organisers. We can say goodbye to stripy shirts. We can even say goodbye to the mobile phone. But we can also say goodbye to the yuppie's most prized accoutrement, the Porsche 944. Except this isn't a 944. This is what Porsche is calling the all-new 968. But that's stretching things a little bit, because apart from those 928 style headlamps, you have to admit, it does look just like a 944. At the back, there's another minor styling change and a new lowered boot floor, so that you can now get inside a kite and a briefcase. Inside, it's pretty much identical to the old 944, still beautifully made and still completely under-equipped. The most exciting gizmo I've got in here is the heated rear window. Like the 944 before it, the 968 uses a 16-valve, 3-litre engine. But now it has much trickery in the camshaft department. So much, in fact, that it's the most powerful engine of its type in the world. Top speed is 156 miles an hour, and it'll haul itself from 0 to 60 in 6.5 seconds. But thanks to the new 6-speed gearbox, it will do, get this, more than 30 mpg. More amazing still, Porsche say that in a smoggy city like Los Angeles or Athens, the fumes coming out of the exhaust are actually cleaner than the air going in through the engine. Yes, and I'm a hobgoblin. Now, in the days of the old 944, people wanting to get on the Porsche ladder could choose between the soggy S2 or the hard-charging turbo. Well, as the 968 has such a welly full of clout, there's no need for a turbo, so the only choice you get is with the suspension. In this one, which is running on ultra-wide tyres and has a sports setup, every bumpy road leads inexorably to the osteopath. The joy of a car like this is that it combines Wagnerian Germanic build quality with more practicality than you might think. Remember, at the end of the day, it is a hatchback. It's also a thrill a minute to drive on these twisting, turning country lanes. It's absolutely sensational. I think if my colleague Tiffany Dell were to thump this round a racetrack, he'd emerge wearing a grin the size of Cheshire. Now, the old 944 Turbo was always regarded as one of the world's best handling cars, and I have a sneaking suspicion that this new 968 is even better. But all the qualities that make it such a superb racer make it a complete pain in the neck for normal drivers like myself. Not only is the ride horrid, but the tyres rumble like distant thunder and indulge in the dangerous practice of following the camber of the road, no matter what the driver does with the wheel. It's absolutely fine for the enthusiast, but for everyone else, it misses the mark by about 76 miles. The standard suspension is far, far better, but as we've come to expect from Porsche, neither is going to be what you'd call a bargain. I have it on very good authority that when this car is launched in May, it's going to cost £40,000. Now, last week I drove it in a back-to-back test with a Nissan 300ZX. I'll admit the Nissan was less well engineered, but it was faster, it was more striking to look at, and it was every bit as well made. It was also £10,000 cheaper. So I'm afraid as far as the 968 is concerned, it's thank you, but no thank you. At £30,000 it would be just fine, but at £40,000 it's starting to play games with the big boys. And they don't come much bigger or better than this big Brit bruiser. I am biased. I adore the XJS, even when, like this one, it costs £48,000. I love its Britishness. I love the way it can make 1,000 miles seem like 100. It may not be that hot in a Cornish fishing village, but it's pretty much the definitive Grand Tourer. I even love its looks. But I'm not stupid. I will admit it's not exactly fault-free. And if you're going to start talking faults, you really have to kick off with its size. Even though the XJS is 16 feet long, the interior is no place for the fat. And if you do find somebody sitting in the back, he will answer to the name of Colin Moynihan. Secondly, though this is one of the new models with the smart new rear windows and this much improved instrument binnacle, it still looks like the designer simply threw all the switches at the dashboard and screwed them down where they landed. It's entirely possible, for instance, to activate the cruise control when you want to lower the electric windows. And speaking of windows, they're so slitty you sometimes get the impression that you're driving a postbox. Then there's the heater, which is either useless or deafening, the wipers, which look like pencils and are about as effective. There's nowhere really to put my left foot, the steering wheel isn't on straight, you can't see half the dials, and the CD player mounted in the boot has an aggravating habit of jumping so much that even Beethoven begins to sound like MC Hammer. But throughout the Jaguar's 17-year life, there have always been niggles. This car, however, has added a new one to the list. You see, this is not an XJS. This is the new Jaguar Sport XJR-S. So called because under that beautifully sculptured bonnet, which is so long you could have an accident and not even know about it, is a 6-litre V12. Oh, I'm sorry, could you just excuse me for a second? Right, now, where were we? Yes, sorry, 6-litre V12 engine. Now, this churns out a not inconsiderable 333 horsepower. Even though it's mated to a rather archaic 3-speed automatic gearbox, this car will still out-accelerate the 968. It also has a top speed of, oh, I don't believe this. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to stop again. What was I going on about? Yes, it'll go at 163 miles an hour. That is very, very fast. But here's the rub. That is my average MPG. It's enough to make your teeth itch. Now you're probably wondering how I can defend a car that is this flawed. Well, look at it this way. You could buy a brand new house with triple glazing and all mod cons. Or you could go for a 17th century manor. It'd cost you a fortune to heat, you'd bang your head on the beams and the plumbing would be from the Dark Ages. But me, I'd take the manor house. Stop, stop, hold everything. I knew I shouldn't have pushed the Porsche off a cliff. I knew there'd be trouble, and sure enough, there is. You see, Porsche GB has a new managing director, and he agrees that £40,000 is too much for the 968. He reckons 34,000 is nearer the mark. Now that puts it on a level with the Nissan 300ZX here, the one I talked about earlier. Now if they do cost about the same, the battle for supremacy in the coupe market becomes as fierce as the battle for supremacy at the polling booth. Oh, damn! I said I wasn't going to mention the election, sorry.